How do you start that change to getting over that fear? You know, that like you're the heavy person going into the gym, or you're wanting to go for a walk outside, but you're worried what the neighbors think. What sounds
Right.
petty to somebody who's not in that boat, but to somebody that could destroy their life. And I know that feeling when you're worrying what people are judging you and stuff. How do you
Sure.
start getting over
Sure.
that fear? Because you really make that person love themselves, but how do you get that
Yes.
initial inertia?
Yes. I totally, I, I get that. I get that I don't fully understand, but I can hear people bring that to me, and I feel
Mhm.
for that. And because of course there's been a lot of situations that I've stepped into where I felt like a fish out of water, and I felt uncomfortable, and I did not want to be in a certain location because I felt like people were watching me. But so you actually brought up a really good example, and well, let's talk about this. Walking into gym and not feeling confident in yourself. And that's why with a lot of my people, I'll say, look, if you're not ready for the gym yet, that's fine. Let's go ahead and let's start building your confidence at home. And so then we will dive right into the commitment issue, and we'll let them start making their promises and start building up that their personal integrity. We call it integrity momentum. So they start feeling better about themselves. But then maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, sometimes months down the road, depending on where they're at, hey, if going into a gym is something you really want to do and you want to transition your workouts there, here's what I want you to do. And I've done this. Drive down to the gym, walk through the doors, have a seat in the chair for 60 seconds, then get up and walk out. That's all I want you to do. The approach is the same. Baby steps. Say you don't want to go outside, you don't want to do laps around the block because you don't want people honking your horn at you. Just walk out your door. Walk out your door,
Mhm.
walk to your next door neighbor's house, turn around and come back. Tomorrow, walk 2 houses down. The next day, walk 3 houses down. Look, you got the rest of your life to do this. What's the rush? The thing is, especially if you're going to walk out your door and if you think you're going to do like 3 laps around the block, and if a car, so you start honking your horn and go, oh, I knew that was going to happen. Ah, and you come running back home and then you lock yourself in the house. Stop. Hey, just walk 3 doors down, turn around and come back. And then do it again. And before you know it, you're going to start to feel more and more comfortable. And also, here's the best part. Quite often, and look, I know a lot of people out there have experienced some really, really terrible things, especially at the at the end of the finger pointing from other people. But you're also going to realize that about 97% of the people out there are really good. 3% are a-holes. They're just dirtbags. They're scumbags.
Definitely.
But 97% of the people are freaking amazing out there. And they're going to see you and they're going to give you a thumbs up or a high five. You walk into a gym and you'll be blown away at the support that you can receive there and the friends that you can meet there. And I know it can seem a little bit intimidating at first, and maybe it all depends on the gym that you're going to, but nevertheless, I'm telling you guys, 3% of the people out there are dark. 97% of the people out there are good. They're good people. They're
Mm.
loving and they support you. And like they see you out there, and they're going to be like, dude, good for you. Go get them. So, but again, no rush in this thing. Baby steps. That's always the approach. That's always the approach that for me in my experience has won time and time and time again.
Because that's something I do say to people is just because you're maybe afraid to go into the gym doesn't mean you can't go for a walk. Doesn't mean you can take the dog somewhere or sit and do a couple press ups at home or just a wee bit more. Like, because my dad's type 2 diabetic, and we keep trying to get him involved without calling it fitness, just moving a bit more, just getting some stuff around. And it's tried to change his attitude towards it. So I know what it's like when
Yeah.
you have this kind of encourage. But for those who are sitting now, it could be something really deep down. It could be like, I don't like the word demon because it has this sort of religious connotation, but for people who have these things that are really holding them back, like real issues, how do you help somebody start believing in themselves, loving themselves, but actually dealing with that one thing? Because you said you've dealt with the diet and the fitness in 45 minutes.
Right.
But then you transform them. You take them from that dark place and show them where they can find the light because you've done it
You
yourself.
know,
Yeah.
yeah. I've had the amazing opportunity to work side by side with some phenomenal psychologists and psychiatrists. And so typically what you've seen on the show when we actually helped a lot of those people through some really dark times, I
Mhm.
understand where my scope of practice is at its limits. And so I allow that's when it's important for the psychologist or psychiatrist to step in. Typically
Mhm.
a psychologist in this situation to help people deal with past trauma. But being able to actually work side by side with the psychologist as people are dealing with this, and for me to kind of to allow myself to be that like a super friend as far as a guide on the journey. But yeah, so when it comes to actually helping people through the journey, most of the folks that I spend my time working with have dealt with some really extreme trauma. And then remember, extreme trauma is all relative. I mean, for someone, it might have been their dog dying when they're a child, and others it could be severe abuse or death or loss, whatever that might be. So it's all relative. It's all how we perceive that experience in our lives and the story that
Mhm.
we tell around it. And so for to but a lot of times significant trauma holds people back from moving forward in their lives because it's so painful. And that's also for a lot of the folks that I've worked with and a lot of people out there in general, that is quite often the root of the hunger that they feel. Because and when I say hunger, what they're doing is they're there's an emotional hole there or the emotional pain, and then they're using food to numb it. And they're using that food to numb that pain from the past. And sometimes that they used it to numb the pain from the past to a point where they don't even realize they're feeling that pain from the past, but they're continually numbing it. But that's an emotional hunger, not a physical hunger. So it's really important that we can clear the past. That's the verbiage that we use. You must clear the past in order to move forward. And in order to do that, there's a lot of different ways, but it's also really important. Number one, um, that when I'm helping someone clear the past, whether it is confronting an issue or trauma, that like, it's always going to be confronting an issue or trauma. But if it involves it like confronting an individual, I always usually have the psychologist help me through
Mhm.
that side of the journey just to make sure, because again I understand where my scope of practice is and where it is not. But nevertheless, being able to witness that and being able to be side by side with that individual as they're going through that, a lot of times it could be, and it's again, it's all unique to the individual. So it could be visiting a grave and actually, or maybe writing a letter to someone who's traumatized you. It could be making a phone call, or it could simply be, um, I mean, it can be a number of different things, but usually it involves some sort of there's a confrontation, and I hope that doesn't come with a negative connotation, but
Mhm.
because the confrontation does not have to be violent or angry or anything like that, but it's going back to the past and unboxing some of this pain, and literally then from there working through that, starting to deal with it, talking about it. A really powerful method I've actually seen a handful of psychologists use is they'll actually take someone back to that moment of trauma, and then they'll have them tell the story in detail. And then they'll have them tell the story again in detail and again and repeat it again and again. And the more the individual repeats it, the more they actually separate the emotion from it. And you can actually start to see it as the story, the event. It was an event that happened. And then they placed all this meaning on it of you're not worthy. It was your fault. You did this. You're this. You're that. And then they can start to actually separate the emotion from it. The more they actually tell the story, and that I've seen that be a really powerful moment for a lot of people, where they, especially when they're talking about some sort of horrendous abuse or loss that they experienced when they were younger. And again, the more they talk about it and they just continue to tell the story over and over again, it becomes just that. It becomes a story. And you watch it, and the first three times they tell the story, there's tears and body convulsing. And then the 10th time that they tell it, because it takes time to actually work through this, the 10th time they tell it, so there's no more emotion. And I've seen that be a really powerful tool. And again, it's all relative. I don't necessarily want anyone to go out there and just start digging through this without also seeking proper advice. Because if the trauma is deep enough, it is wonderful to have a therapist to actually walk you through
Mhm.
that process as well, so you can really deal with it. So I don't know what that looks like, but it's also a really powerful exercise that you could actually try. But it can be very painful as well. It is painful, but it's also very healing.